All right, so you should notice this time there's not nearly as many problems. Or not, I won't say it's not as many, but there's definitely not as many problems because I realized that the pace of that last sheet kind of threw everything off. So still making sure we go ahead and get our solving review. Again, the importance of the solving review is we need to make sure that we master two-step equations. We need to make sure we master doing combine like terms. We need to make sure we master variables on both sides. And then, of course, the things that are going to be on your assessment in a few weeks. So remember again that what we do first is we take the opposite of 7, bringing down what's left, dividing by 4, getting x equals 5. So again, the two-step equations that we would call home, that's the key idea, is making sure that we understand how to do this. So again, if you're still having an issue with this, make sure you talk to your teacher, because the reason why I'm not really explaining as deeply how to do a two-step equation is because we've gone over two-step equations since first quarter, and you should be pretty close to getting that at this point, mainly because if you're working on this right now, it means you passed the 3 quarters, and you at least have a clue on what you're supposed to do. Now you just got to make sure it's just as automatic as what I did there. Next, we're going to talk about the like terms. Remember, if I draw this and they're on the same side, you put those two things together. 2x plus 3x makes 5x. Your plus 8 comes down with it. And then that's why I said you need to master home. This is home. So subtract 8, subtract 8. 5x equals 10. Divide by 5, divide by 5. X equals 2. And that's all you're asked to do. The solving itself, as you keep moving forward, doesn't get any tougher. It just gets more work before you get here. And so you want to keep that in mind. The other thing you want to make sure you don't get messed up is that a regular x is 1x plus 5x, which makes 6x when you put those two things together. Plus 6 equals 36. And then from there, you again go like you would from home. So 6x equals 30, divided by 6, divided by 6, x equals 5. And that's all. Again, regular home base, combine like terms leads to home. But then even in this situation, which you got to make sure you're ready for, variables on both sides, you have to remember to move the smaller x. Again, there's x's on both sides. So we move the smaller x to the larger x. And remember, that's minus 1. That's 3x's minus 1x, which is 2x, plus 5 equals 13. And then from there, we do as we have typically done. Again, feel free to pause the video if you need to. Just make sure you copy all this stuff and don't lose half your credit, at least in my room. Half your credit for not copying everything exactly as it is. Any shortcuts you take probably will cost you some points. And this one, don't forget the smaller x is over here. So minus x, that's gone. 6 comes down. 7x minus, remember that's 1x equals 6x minus 6. From there, you add 6 to both sides. That becomes 12. And then dividing by 6 ends up as 2 equals x. Keep in mind, again, if the main x is on the right side, keep the main x on the right side. If the main x is on the left, keep the main x on the left, and do it that way. Now to the problems that will definitely be on your assessments coming up. When there's a 5 on the bottom, multiply by 5. These two things go away. 2x comes down with, I'm sorry, it's supposed to multiply by 5 here. 2x comes down with 20. Then from there, you divide by 2. And x is equal to 10. So again, 5 on both sides. Those two 5s canceled. This 5 times 4 became 20. And that's where we went from there. Just like on the second one, 2's on the bottom, so we want to multiply by 2 on both sides. These two things cancel out, bringing down 3x and 18. You then divide by 3 on both sides, getting x equals 6 as your answer. Not a tough question, but something that you definitely need to make sure you practice. If you have it down, that's great, but if not, you want to make sure you get that down and take advantage of it on your work, because we are putting those on your sheets just to make sure you get a chance to work on your own. So if you're not even trying it out, then you're probably not getting better on your own. 3 and 4. Remember, in this case, we have a 3 and a 4 at the bottom, so what we do is we multiply by the location where 3 and 4 meet, which is 12. You then, because you need to work this out, do 12 divided by 3, which is 4, and then you multiply that 4 by the top number, which turns that into 4x, not 1x. You then say 12 divided by 4 is 3, and again, you multiply by the top, which means plus 3. You then do your 12 times 2, which is 24, giving us the rest of the work as what it is. Most of the time, whenever you get that problem, you're going to get an ugly answer, mainly because those fractions, you got 2 fractions in there, it'll be really hard to make the third fraction match. In this one, we have 2/5 x 1/3 equals 3. We're looking at a 5 and a 3, which meet at 15 because 5 times 3 is 15. Remember again that you will do 15 divided by 5 is 3. Pardon me for a second. Had to sneeze for a second, sorry. But 15 divided by 5 is 3. You now multiply that 3 by 2 to be 6. 15 divided by 3 is 5. You now multiply those two things to make 5. If you're thinking about a clock, every single segment of one of those is 15 minutes. So 3 of those segments is going to be 45 minutes. At least that's how I think of multiplying 15s. Just like 4 15s make 60, because that'll be 15, 30, 45, 60, and so on. Anyway, subtracting your 5 gives us 6x equals 40. Dividing by 6. For the most part, remember that you need to recognize both of those are even, so you can cut both of those in half to get 20 over 3. Please make sure you are mastering this. One of the biggest issues that I found when I taught Algebra 1B, the class that you're going to be moving to next year, is that people who don't know their order of operations and their distributive property tend to fail the first test. So I'm going over this so we can keep trying to make sure you understand. Parentheses first is always P, then E, then everything else. So parentheses first means 11 minus 1 is 10 squared divided by 5. Exponents next, because the parentheses are now gone. 1/5 times 100, because that's what 10 squared is, which means 10 times 10 divided by 5. When you divide 100 by 5, how many 5s fit into 100? Well, if you ever had $100 in 5s, it's 20 5s make 100. And then 20 divided by 5 is 4. And then the last thing on this, again, make sure you have this down. 316 divided by 2 could go that way. It could also go this way as long as you're understanding what's going on. But the difference in today's is that 2 does fit into 3. And so it fits in once. And so you subtract, you bring this down. 2 goes into 11 5 times with 1 left over. Bring it down. 2 goes into 16 8 times, giving us nothing left over, so 158. Or, like I said, if you're doing it this way, 2 goes into 3 once with 1 left over. 2 goes into what I would view this as 11 5 times with 1 left over. 2 goes into what I would view as 16 8 times, and notice that you still have 158. Just make sure you're working on some way to divide a small single digit by bigger numbers, and you should be okay. After that, if you turn your paper over, you'll see this, and I'll work on this with you, and then I'll go to my actual notes. But the key to today is making sure you understand whether two things are congruent or supplementary, and all we talked about, and as it says, all pairs are parallel. So these two are parallel, and these two are parallel. And so what's going to happen is, no matter what, every angle that is obtuse in this is going to be the same size. Every angle that is acute in this picture is going to be the same size. And anything that doesn't match like that means they're going to be supplementary. And so when you're talking about 1 and 5, you should have practiced enough to recognize that 1 is bigger than 90 because it's obtuse. 5 is bigger than 90 because it's obtuse, which means these two things are congruent because they're both obtuse angles. And that's all it takes. It only works whenever it's parallel lines, but again, that's all it takes to really do that. 14 and 9. 14 is blatantly acute because it's not bigger than 180. 9 is obtuse because it does look bigger than 180. These two things are not the same type, which means that they would be supplementary, which means they add up to 180. And that's all you need to practice doing. If they're the same, they're congruent. If they're not the same, they're supplementary. It takes time to do it, but again, you have plenty of time to mess up in class and ask questions and practice. And at some point, as long as you're trying to get better, you will. Angle 11, angle 8. Angle 11 is obtuse. Angle 8 is acute. Look at that angle there. That's bigger than 90. That's definitely smaller than 90, which means these two things are supplementary. And then 16 and 11. 16 is acute. 11 is blatantly obtuse. We just talked about that, which means these two things are also supplementary. So kind of keep that in mind as you do that, and we'll see where we go from there. Give me a second. My battery's about to die. Okay, that should be all the drama I need to deal with. But the bottom line again is making sure you recognize what's congruent, what's supplementary, because that's what's going to get you to start based off of what we learned yesterday. Everything else should kind of come together. So moving to this lesson, yesterday we talked about the algebraic portion of parallel and perpendicular lines with problems that did not have a figure. We started figures on the worksheet, or we started to look at figures on the worksheet, but again, the key idea was making sure you understood three situations. If you knew they were congruent, then that means we set those two things equal. If we knew they were supplementary, which means they add to 180, then we literally wrote this plus that equals 180. If we knew they were complementary, then we knew that this plus that equals 90, and that's how we wrote it. Those are the only three situations you need to fight. But again, that represents the first step of our algebraic work. So translating a geometry problem into an algebra problem starting with either angle 1 is equal to angle 2, or angle 3 plus 7 is equal to 180, or angle 4 plus 9 is equal to 90, or whatever those angles are. But that is the first step of converting it into an algebraic problem. The second step was with the substitution, and then after that we kind of worked based off of whatever we needed to do. So with that being the case, today we are going to look directly at figures. It's going to require us to build our own problem from the information. So, and I believe this is the question you need to copy for your work. So make sure you copy it with me so we can see. And I don't think I need to do a pre-problem like I did yesterday, because for the most part, you already did pre-problems yesterday. And again, it's not that hard. It gives you a measure for angle 1, which means we're dealing with angle 1. It gives you a measurement for angle 7, which means we're dealing with angle 7. So common sense says we need to figure out what 1 and 7 are. Based off what I see, 1 is obtuse, 7 is also obtuse, which means these two things are congruent. That's the symbol for congruent. And so what I know for a fact based off of this, because these two things are parallel, again, it wouldn't work unless those were there, is that angle 1 equals angle 7. From there, if you remember, that's my starting point from yesterday. 1's going to turn into 2x plus 7. 7's going to turn into 8x minus 13. And then now we solve. Hey, this is the stuff we worked on to start the day. Move the smaller x over to the larger x. 7 comes down with 6x plus 13. I think I might have messed up. No, minus 13. I definitely messed up. I don't know where I got all those numbers from. Bad on me. Plus 13, plus 13. You get 20 equals 6x. You divide by 6, and the most you can get is 10 over 3. I apologize for that. I try to make sure these things don't get ugly. But again, the bottom line here, as long as you understand, is that the first thing you have to do now is, yesterday I gave you this information and I told you they were congruent, or I gave you this information and I told you they were supplementary, or I gave you this information and I told you that they were complementary. Today I'll give you the information and you have to get the relationship off of the figure. So just kind of keep that in mind. That's why we work so hard on that. Question B. Again, you're looking at 4 and 5. So the first thing you need to do is go to 4 and say, yep, that's acute. 5 is, hey, that's obtuse, which means these two things are supplementary because they're different. And so what we know is that angle 4 plus angle 5 has to equal 180. Now we substitute 12x plus 7, which is your angle 4, plus 8x plus 13, which is your angle 5, equals 180. Remember, we try to keep these numbers nice. That doesn't change because there's nothing multiplying. A plus sign is useless, so we just simply put these two things together, getting 20x plus 20 equals 180. And from there we solve as usual. So again, it's not that bad of a situation. Just make sure again that you're working to understand that the general idea here is you have to recognize, are they the same because they're both the same type, or are they supplementary because they're both different types? One more example before we wrap this up. It says that AB is perpendicular to CB. This is AB, that's CB, and what we know about perpendicular is that perpendicular crosses at a right angle. So therefore it means that this is a right angle. Now that's important because what it means is that these two things are what we would call complementary, because we know that complementary means these two things add up to 90, and a right angle is 90 degrees. So whenever you've got the information to know that's a right angle, that means we can now say that these two things are complementary. So if you want to start officially, you could say angle ABD plus angle DBC, because remember we've worked on doing that. ABD is this one, DBC is that one, equals 90. From there we convert ABD to be 2x plus 3. We convert DBC to be 3x plus 7. And from there, follow your heart. We know this isn't going to change, so we put 2x together with 3x to make 5x. We put 3 together with 7 to make 10. And then we go. We're home now. 5x therefore equals 80. And then you divide both sides by 5. Again, that division we worked on, 5 goes into 8 one time with 3 left over, 5 goes into 36 times, and there we go. So the key for today is just make sure you take your time before starting the problem. Use the given information to find out how they fit. You need to remember that most of them are going to be 1 of 3 situations. So if it doesn't make sense, ask yourself, are they congruent? And see if it is. Are they supplementary? And see if it is. Are they complementary? Remember that complementary is usually going to be for a perpendicularity or a right angle somewhere. But just make sure you ask for help as you need it, and go ahead and hand this thing in if it's fully complete, and then get the second sheet or however you run it in your class. But again, that's how we do it in mine. Bring the paper up, get your second sheet so I can grade your work and then get it back to you. Outside of that, I'll talk to you later, and have a good day.